Hi, my name is Susan Cranston, and I'm the host of Authentik You, a talk show that features people who've made changes in their life to follow a more authentic path. We all have hopes and dreams, but all too often, we don't pay attention to those needs or to the deep calling of our subconscious. Sometimes it's easier to go through the motions and not challenge ourselves to live our life to the fullest. We can live an authentic life, one that brings us joy and a sense of purpose. If we focus with determination, we can make anything happen. It's all a matter of deciding how much we want to make our dream a reality. My guest today is Patti Moses. She's the founder of the Satori Centre in Kitchener. She went to university in her 40s for her undergrad degree and completed her master's in her 50s. Joking that she'll be working toward her PhD in her 60s, Patti has already set and accomplished many goals. Patti fulfilled her personal dream of starting the Satori Centre in 2009. It is one that she's been focused on by cultivating her meditation practice for many years. Living proof that it's never too late to make significant changes in one's life, I'm so pleased to feature her as she shares her message of hope, peace, and loving kindness to others. Patti, thank you so much for joining me on Authentik You today.
You're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
You have been on a journey. You have been on a road that sometimes probably has been a bit smoother, sometimes it's been very bumpy. Can you share some of your challenges that led you to the path that you're on right now?
Sure. You know, I didn't necessarily have a real easy childhood. There was a lot of conflict in my family. My mother passed away when I was 13, so it was a really, really difficult time for me. And I left home fairly early. I was married young at 20. I had my son Tyler at 23 and my daughter Jessica at 26. Back in the 70s and 80s, that wasn't an unusual thing to have children in early 20s. But my marriage didn't go that well, and I was divorced at 30. So I had kind of a difficult start, and then I became a single parent, which also wasn't an easy road. I had 2 children to raise, I had a mortgage to pay, and for a period of time I was in an area of work that I really didn't enjoy, and it was not an easy road, and I know for periods of time that I was almost depressed about the fact that what I was doing in my life. So the first 20, 30 years of my life weren't, other than the joy of having my children, obviously, they weren't the easiest years so far.
So it was a really busy time for you where you were focused on the needs of others. You've had, difficult childhood, having children, the marriage breakdown. You worked in a very male-dominated environment too, in a very stressful environment. And what you've described for me is that it really wasn't, you weren't being true to your authentic self in terms of that work, where there might have been conflict in terms of saying you're not happy with what it was that you were doing. And there was something else that was probably calling deep inside you.
Oh, absolutely, Susan. I remember back to the time that I worked in, for a period of time I worked in the printing industry. I ran an offset printing press, which certainly wasn't a traditional female role, and there was only a handful of us in Kitchener that actually did that kind of work. What I found in that industry, and I certainly hope that I don't want to stereotype that the male-dominated industry is always like this, but my experience was that the people that I had worked with seemed to have very, very different values than I had. And it was difficult for me because I had to endure listening to people make jokes and degrade people because of their gender, because of their race, because of their sexual orientation. And I couldn't buy into it. And it turned out that I was very alienated from my peers. And so it was a very lonely period of time. I would always get told, what's the matter with you? Don't you have a sense of humor? But I couldn't sell off my values just to be part of a group. And so I knew deep down that what I was doing definitely wasn't, a road or a path of passion for me at that time.
So what was the turning point? Was it a a Satori moment for you? And also, can you just take a second to describe what Satori means?
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked that question because I researched the names of my business quite extensively, and I did a little bit of marketing to test some of the names, and people kept coming back with they loved the name Satori Centre, just kind of rolled off their tongue. And the meaning of Satori is to have a sudden awakening or a sudden awareness or understanding.
An aha moment?
An aha moment, exactly. And as a fan of Oprah, I have followed her aha moments over the decades and her light bulb moments. And it really fit for me because the times you asked, what was the turning point? And when I look at the turning points, there were always aha moments for me. There was always Satori moments. And so it was easy for me to choose that name based on that meaning.
Was there something, though, I mean, this is the thing that always, I'm just crave trying to find this information out. You're on the way and you know that something isn't right, but something happens in that Satori moment, and you might have had many, but there's one that seems to be pivotal at some point where you say, that's it. It's your jumping off point. It's that leap of faith that you take and say, I need to do something different. And for you, was it going back to school? Was that part of that experience?
Well, prior to going to school, because it was, I guess, back to university, I was still in the printing industry, and about 2 weeks before Christmas in 1999, I was downsized out of my job. Excuse me. And there I was, a single mother with the gifts already bought and under the tree, and 2 children, and a mortgage to pay for, and I no longer had a job. And I was absolutely devastated, not having a clue what I was going to do from that moment forward. And it knocked me off kilter, and I remember thinking, something has to come out of this that's going to be better, but I couldn't imagine what it was going to be. And I ended up through a very dear friend who worked at the Working Centre. She introduced me to Stephanie Mancini. Her and her husband Joe are the founders of the Working Centre. And I just had a really casual, nice conversation with Stephanie about what my options might be. And she said to me, you would do well to go back to school, to go to university. And I said, well, how do I do that? I have a mortgage, I have kids, I can't do that. She said, you apply for OSAP and you go. And so I applied for OSAP and I went.
That's fantastic. I want to hear more about this, and I want to hear more about that Christmas, what that was like and the experience of letting go for you, because I know you have a little bit of a story to share there as well. So stay with us. We're going to be right back, and we're going to hear more from Patti Moses about her journey. We'll be right back. Hi, I'm Susan Cranston, the host of Authentik You. Thanks for joining us. I'm here with my guest, Patti Moses. She's the founder and owner of the Satori Centre in Kitchener. And she was just talking about her journey and some of the roadblocks or bumps she's had along the way. And we were just talking about the news that she got when she was just let go from her job working for a printing press company. And she was just going to share some experiences with us about what that experience. What was that Christmas like for you just after you got the news and the presents were purchased, they were sitting under the tree, and those bills were yet to be paid for all of those purchases?
Well, initially it wasn't very good because I went home from that news pretty devastated. But after a couple of days of having a pity party for myself and wondering what on earth am I going to do and worrying about the future, I finally came to an aha moment, a Satori moment, and I realized I have no control over this. It's done. And so what can I really do in this moment? I had negotiated a good package, so I was good for a couple of months. I decided to just let go of all the worry, of all the stress, and just enjoy the time with my family, with my kids, and just to be in the moment, just take it as it came.
And how was that experience for you in terms of letting go?
Well, it turned out to be probably one of the best Christmases that I had had, and it was just so odd to be, from one minute being down at what I thought was the lowest low, to just being on a nice even keel and being able to just, all the weight and pressure was lifted off me, and yeah, it was just a lovely, lovely Christmas.
That's a great message to share. So after that, and you were introduced to your friend through the Working Center, who suggested that you consider going to university and applying for a loan to be able to make that happen. Mm-hmm. So what happened after that, Patti?
So I ended up being accepted into university to do my undergrad. And what I ended up doing was I fast-tracked my degree in order to not owe too much money. I fast-tracked a 3-year degree in 2 years. So I took 5 courses every term. And during that period of time, I also was working part-time at Anselma House, the shelter for abused women. I had started off as a volunteer, and through my university years, I was working relief work. So I would work 1 or 2 shifts a week. And what was happening was I was starting to really notice that I felt a whole different feeling about going to work. I actually really loved it. And I would work with the women who'd come to the shelter. And people can tell you when I was there, I didn't want to leave at the end of my shift. I was excited to get up to go in the morning. Just before I finished my degree, I ended up getting hired on full-time. So it was like everything, I think the letting go had opened up all these other doors for me. And it was finally, I was on my path of passion. And it was just so freeing and so just wonderful.
You weren't fighting against the friction or the tension of the worry. You stayed open to the experience of what it was, and you were in what I would describe as a state of flow when you were working with those women, to be able to enjoy that moment and to be present in that, and then you decided to pursue your master's after that. You weren't done yet. So you were hired full-time, and then you went back to school again?
Well, what happened, Susan, was that I was at Anselma House for a couple of years, and in the early 2000s, the government of the time slashed a lot of the social services programs, and so our program was cut in half, and I was one of the first, or last in, and so I was one of the first out. So I left on a Friday, Anselma House, and I started working on a Monday at Family and Children's Services in child protection. So it was a similar type of work, but much more stressful, a lot more responsibility, and yeah, it was a very, very different environment.
And you could sense that you were picking up the stress. You didn't feel the same way about that work that you did when you were working with the women that were in the shelter?
Absolutely. I still enjoyed it very much. I liked the people work. I love working with people and helping people to solve problems. But ultimately what ended up happening was in 2007 I was diagnosed with heart disease. And I knew that, again, I had to make a change in my life. At that time, I applied to do my master's in social work, and I was accepted that summer after my diagnosis and my surgery. And so I started doing my master's in the fall of 2007 for a master's of social work at Laurier.
Wow. So even with that diagnosis then, everything just continued to progress for you in terms of your path that you were on, the journey you were on, and toward the Satori Centre. Absolutely.
I mean, in 2005, when I was researching the name, I had a vision that I wanted to have a center of some sort. I knew that it would include meditation. I knew that I wanted to be a therapist. I had none of the credentials at that time, but I bought all of the domains for the Satori Centre with some kind of an idea that at some point I'm going to have this center. So I had a real, pretty strong vision of what I wanted to do.
Well, if you bought the URLs, you must have.
But I didn't have any of the credentials to do the work. I didn't have my meditation certificate. I didn't have my master's degree. But I started in 2007 in my 50s to do my master's, and I finished in 2009. And that was when I started to broaden out in terms of the services that I was offering in the center.
And we're going to take a we're going to take a break in another second, and I really want to explore what it was like going back to, going to university in your 40s and then again in your 50s. What advice would you give someone that might be considering doing something like that, or if they have that inkling or that sort of feeling that they're going to do something and they want to buy a domain name, what tips that you'd have for them? So stay with us. We're going to be back with Patti Moses, and she's going to share some great tips to help anyone that's considering going back to the university. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Authentik You. Hi, I'm Susan Cranston, and thanks for joining us here in Authentik You. My guest today is Patti Moses. She's the founder of the Satori Centre in Kitchener, and we were just talking about what it's like to go to university when you're in your 40s, get your undergrad degree, and then continue on, get your master's in the 50s. What tips would you have for someone who may say, you know what, I really want to pursue getting a degree or going back and getting a master's? What was that like, and what would you suggest for them?
Well, it was exciting and terrifying all in one. I graduated in '74. That's sort of aging myself, but it had been a long time since I'd been in school. And but the one thing that I found with university was that it wasn't necessarily always the content of the class that was the biggest lesson of the day. It was working through the barriers that are put up and learning to advocate for myself and to schedule and to organize. And so there are so many different skills that come with post-secondary, not just found in the classroom. So I absolutely love learning and loved school.
How did you overcome the fear, though, of making that leap? Because I think, you're in this environment. There are a lot of younger students there. It's a completely different culture and environment. Was there something that some advice that you'd give someone to say, this is how I coped with it or I dealt with it?
Well, at that point, Susan, I was starting to really feel that I was on the road to my passion. I was doing authentic things that felt good. And so it seemed like if I just kept on that path, the universe just kept opening doors for me. And one of the things that I tell people is follow your passion. And it's kind of cliche, but quite frankly, if you find something that you really love doing, I would say find a way to do it. Because for me, doing what I do, it's not work. I enjoy it so much, and I'm so honored to be part of people's own paths and their own journey to their authentic self. So I just say, find your passion and go for it.
Beautifully said. That was just terrific. So when you're working with someone in the Satori Centre, when they're coming in and you work on meditation as well, what are some tips that we might be able to give viewers to help them focus if they want to start down that path of working on meditation skills? What would you suggest that they do?
Well, sometimes it's good to take a class because you can learn the foundations of meditation. They can Google meditation. There's lots and lots of guided meditations online. But just, I think the bottom line is to work on being more mindful, being more present in the moment with whatever it is that you're doing, whatever task you're doing in the day. You mentioned the word flow, the term flow earlier, and that's something that I talk about in my classes, my meditation classes, is to really be focused, to bring all your energy and focus to whatever it is that you're doing in this very moment, whether it's sitting talking to someone, whether it's brushing your teeth and using all of your senses to have that experience, or whether it's, washing dishes or walking in the park. So I would say to people, work on being mindful in the moment. And that's a really great way to start a practice and to start to build that.
That, again, beautiful advice there, because I think there's the physical consciousness as opposed to your subconscious, and we're dealing in that physical space. We're not necessarily paying attention to the things that we need to be mindful of, whether it's eating or walking or whatever it is. We can tend to get in a bit of a haze, or I call it being on autopilot. We're really not paying attention.
Right. And
sometimes I think that happens, and it can be dangerous, because you can be driving down the road and not even remember going, did I stop for that light?
A lot of people who come to the class will identify with when I talk about sort of the automatic pilot, when you left your home and you get to work and you think, I don't even remember the drive. And so I give them some tips about how to be really present in the moment. And one of the tips that is really helpful is to set a little timer just to go off sort of sporadically through the day that will bring you to that very moment wherever you are and whatever it is that you're doing. And if you could have an app that will allow you to set them out throughout the day, just sort of randomly, it's a really nice way to just be reminded to come back to the moment.
That's great.
Yeah.
Or, tie a string around your finger.
That
if
too.
You remember to do that. So, you've given some great tips here and great suggestions for being present. I love that, because the past is gone and we can't control the future. And letting go and being present is so helpful to enjoy this moment.
Absolutely.
Because that is, like you said, all we have. Who's been an inspiration for you?
Well, definitely my family, my children have been very inspirational for me. They are both, my son Tyler lives in California, he's an artist. My daughter is here and she's given me 2 beautiful grandchildren. Shout out to my kids and my grandchildren. They are both living their own authentic lives, and they inspire me. And just as importantly, my clients inspire me. The people who come to me with stories that you can't fathom the kind of trauma and situations that they've gone through, and they dig deep and they find the courage and the strength and whatever it is that it takes to get through those things. And I often encourage my clients to go home and watch The Wizard of Oz, because I think it's a great metaphor for the kind of work that I do. There were off the 3 characters looking for something that they thought was outside of themselves, and the Oz, said to them at the end, you have everything you need within you. And my job when I'm working with clients is to help them to dig deep and to find what it is that they need to get through whatever they're experiencing, because it's there. They've just forgotten it, or it's gotten lost. So that's sort of a good metaphor, The Wizard of Oz. I love that movie.
I love that movie too. I'm going to go home and watch it with my with my daughters. And I remember that Glinda saying to Dorothy, "You didn't even need the ruby slippers, right? She didn't. She had it all.
That's
herself
right.
too." How can we reach you? How do we get in touch with you?
You can go to my website at www.satoricentre.ca. I also have an email, info@satoricentre.ca. And if you're on Facebook, just type in Satori Centre, and please join my page. I post daily, and I think nice inspirational postings. And so, yeah, I'd love to see you there.
Thank you very much. It was an absolute delight and a privilege to have you on Authentik You today. And I'd also like to thank you for joining us on Authentik You. There are many ways that you could have spent the last 30 minutes, and I'm delighted that you chose to spend it with us. And if you'd like more information about our guest or about Authentik You, please connect with us at AuthentikYou.com and be social with us on Facebook or on Twitter at Authentik You, and that's Authentic with a K. Special thanks for set design by David Boys, hair by Scott Keller of So Chic, and makeup by Jen Hovinga of Distinct Boutique. And finally, thanks to my fabulous crew here at Rogers, and thanks for watching. And remember, it's always a good day to be your authentic self.